demonstrators continue. Joe Gonzales says he is receiving death threats over his announcement. Eyewitness News reporter Jordan Foster talks to him about his decision.
Reopen the case! Reopen the case!
Sunday, a crowd of protesters demanded the Bexar County District Attorney's office relook into the shooting deaths of Charles Roundtree and Marquise Jones, two black men who were shot and killed by two San Antonio police officers. Monday, District Attorney Joe Gonzales sent a statement saying as of now, he had no plans of reopening any of the cases, even adding in the name of Antroni Scott.
There's always a potential for an elected DA to reopen a case, but typically there's got to be a reason to reopen those cases.
Gonzales says all of the cases have been reviewed many times, but without any new information or evidence, he doesn't think there will be any new indictments.
So that's just it. How many times do you go to the well? How many times do you keep going to the grand jury? Do you go until you get an indictment after you try several times?
In Sunday's crowd, Mayor Ron Nirenberg.
I think we have to understand the frustrations and listen to the message.
The mayor didn't say whether he supported reopening any of the cases, but did say he recognizes the problems in the police system that need to be fixed.
Our commitment as a community is to ensure that we're pursuing the reforms necessary to make these cases not happen again. And that's got to be our focus.
Reopen the case!
As the outpour of support for both families continue, Gonzales says he will continue following the cases for any new evidence or information that would give them enough to be able to indict.
You can't do it because people are angry. You have to do it based on whether or not the facts support that somebody broke the law.
Jordan Foster, KENS 5, Eyewitness News.